So there you see prosecutors asking for the death penalty for Aileen Wuornos for her crime, her murder. Let me turn quickly to my guest this morning. I'm joined by Robert Altchiler, and again, he is a very good friend of mine. Very happy to have him with me. It's been a while since you've been here. He's a criminal defense attorney and also an adjunct professor of trial advocacy at Pace University. So I want to thank you very much for being with me, man.
Thanks for having me.
All right, good to see you again. Let's start off by just trying to get to the heat of the heart of this thing, and that is basically, you know, this case is a single murder, but the bottom line is, as a defense attorney, you'd be representing someone who prosecutors and pretty much the press considers a serial killer. Very serious. Is there a difference in the way you approach the case as a result?
There's a difference, one, because of the publicity, which you have to minimize at every corner, but it's also harder to defend a case like this because if you have a series of killings and the prosecutors are going to be allowed to introduce evidence of those killings, you obviously have to fight not only each of the battles concerning each of the murders, but also the suspicion, the strong suspicion and the inclination that the jurors will have to think, well, there is smoke here, so there must be fire. So yes, it's much more difficult.
Yeah, the deal is also that it is a death penalty case, so I think also you'd be thinking as a defense attorney right off the bat that mitigating circumstances are going to play a big role in your case, because again, you do have to deal with this sort of heavy evidence that they have against her, both in terms of the individual case in front of her, but as well as those other cases that they might be able to bring in evidence of.
You're right. I mean, you're fighting, this is a full-time job. You're fighting many battles at the same time. In this case, there is evidence of mitigation. There's also substantial evidence concerning the aggravating factors as well. So yes, you're concerned with eventually what the punishment could be, and there'll be a separate death penalty phase after a guilty verdict, but every step along the way, you're fighting the battle to have a not guilty, but also prevent the death penalty from being imposed.
Yeah. What are some of the issues facing prosecutors in terms of getting this other evidence in? I mean, it would seem to be extremely prejudicial, but there are some rules governing the idea that prosecutors can bring in evidence of other crimes, even though she may not be convicted of those crimes.
In the typical criminal trial, prosecutors are not allowed, generally, to bring in evidence of the defendant's bad character. The thinking is that a person sitting in the defendant's chair has enough against, you know, him at a trial or her at a trial, so that the jury should just decide a case based on the evidence. But there are certain exceptions, and those are the exceptions that the prosecutors are looking to use in this particular case. If there is a narrow theory of relevance tending to make that type of evidence important, a judge can allow it. Narrow theories of relevance, according to the United States Supreme Court, include if this other evidence tends to show the identity of the perpetrator, if it tends to disprove that it was actually a mistake or an accident, or, as is the case here, and they've gone many different theories here, but if it tends to show an MO or modus operandi. And in order for it to be appropriate evidence to bring in against the defendant in this case, they would have to show that there is a sufficient nexus. In other words, if the crimes in the past that are uncharged in this case are similar, sufficiently similar to the crime at the bar, then prosecutors might be able to get it into evidence.
Sure, and it's interesting to note, I want to tell our viewers that leading up to the arrest in this particular murder of Richard Mallory, cops had been baffled by a series of similar crimes, about 6 of them, men they found dead on the side of the road in very similar fashion, and they all attributed those to Aileen Wuornos when she was caught, and then she did confess. So it's that type of thing that may be brought in front of this jury, which may ultimately be the death knell for Aileen Wuornos in this case. We'll have to wait and see. Right now, we're going to take a quick break. We'll have much, much more on the other side. Please stay with us.